Hi, this is Brookes with Character Design Forge. In my recent Mario video, I had this Cappy hat, and I don't have a Sonic hat, necessarily. I wore one once and did not buy it. Best thing I can do is this Sonic shirt. You know what I could do for you? There we go. Is that too soon? It's too soon, isn't it? In my recent Mario character design spotlight, I contrasted Mario and Sonic, and maybe took a couple shots at Sonic's expense, and reasonably so. That might have made you assume that I dislike Sonic. But that actually isn't the case at all. I may not be a Sonic super fan, but Sonic 2 was my first console game. I've always enjoyed the games to a reasonable extent, and I think that Sonic Mania is one of the greatest things to come out of this year, and that is not the last thing I'll say about Sonic Mania in this video. The thing that's always intrigued me about Sonic the most is how devoted its fan base can be, the amount of fan fiction and fan art they can develop, always through even the roughest of times for the franchise. And instead of looking down on or making fun of that aspect of the fan base, I thought it would be a lot more valuable to try and figure out why exactly that is. For context, just a reminder that I tend to look specifically at the character design aspect of things, the art, the storytelling, and how those things interact with gameplay. I think in order to look at Sonic, we have to acknowledge the sort of fractured identity that the franchise has. You have the modern Sonic, the classic Sonic, the actual classic Sonic, and this is the result of what we've talked about before, a character that is designed to be modern. This is a character meant to be cooler than Mario in 1991, and as times change, as trends change, the character needs to change in order to adapt to and appeal to the latest trend or the latest decade. What's interesting about Sonic is the choice to continue using every iteration of the character, and it's not just a one-time thing. The game Sonic Generations functions pretty much the same as the movie Star Trek Generations, the old meaning the new, but the way that Sonic works, it's almost as if Kirk and Picard load up onto the Enterprise together and continue having new adventures together indefinitely. It seems like the 3D Sonic games might have taken so many missteps that the inclusion of a classic pudgy Sonic is a way to reassure fans that might have been alienated by the 3D games by saying, no, it's okay, you do still have interest in these games. Now onto Sonic's visual design. It's one that's born of something that could be clearly legible on the Sega Genesis. The eyes, the stomach, the gloves, and the shoes, they're all segments that differentiate visually from the blue of the rest of the character. And the shoes are obviously special sneakers, which emphasize that this character is about speed. From a shape language perspective, and again, these are the shapes that a character designer is using to communicate or express something about the character, Sonic is this balanced mix of round and appealing shapes and triangular shapes. So triangles invoke a lot of things. They're dynamic, they can suggest speed, action, movement, and a little bit of danger, like the tip of a spike. Overall, it makes Sonic literally edgier than his competition Mario. And yes, that is something that we do need to acknowledge, is the fact that Sonic was a corporate decision to cut into a market. So characters are designed for a purpose, and that was his. This early Sonic is short and pudgy, more so than the later ones, and there's a game design reason for that. It simply feels more intuitive to control a character that inhabits a square bounding box, or who is about as wide as they are tall, than it is to control one that's much taller or much wider. The perfect example of this is the indie game Thomas Was Alone, where you can control different shaped rectangular characters, and even though they all have the same exact physics and mechanics, you can just feel playing the tall rectangle immediately feels a little bit more top-heavy or unstable. So if you're playing a character that moves in all directions, it feels better to have them shaped equidistantly, right? I hope that makes sense. Next, though, we see Sonic transition into his modern incarnation, and a few things change. For one thing, a 3D character that's being looked at from another angle doesn't need to be as square. And so along with the fact that they were looking to modernize the character and to emphasize his speed, the legs get longer, the spikes get longer, and Sonic goes from irreverent to full-on confident hedgelord. Now, before I get into why Sonic still has such unapologetic and rabid fans, can you indulge me for a second on my favorite version of Sonic? It's the one from the Tyson Hesse-directed Sonic Mania intro, and the reason that I love this Sonic so much can be summed up in what is literally 1/2 second of animation. Bear with me. I've said before that characters become likable when they have flaws. Something about them, their personality or their description, it tends to endear us to the character. Now, Sonic for a long time has had this very confident, too cool for school veneer of him, where he's almost portrayed as perfect. Now, when a character doesn't have any flaws, it almost causes us to be repelled by them, because there's just something off. We don't know of any humans or people that are absolutely perfect, and therefore we can't relate to a character as one. Sonic's always seemed in control, but this intro animation shines a light on a version of the character that I really think has some serious potential. And again, I'm telling you, it's a 1/2 second of animation. As our confident Sonic is speeding along, he's looping and swerving along a track, he gets to a certain point where he's suddenly at the edge, and he has to put the brakes on and flail around. His expression becomes worried, and in that second, Sonic becomes a flawed character. His confidence becomes overconfidence. Think about that. The difference between a character who is completely in control of their speed and one who is moving so fast that they can't act fast enough in case something goes wrong. It has this element of inexperience. It's something that we can relate to a lot more. Now, I know that Sonic's power and speed don't come from his shoes, but imagine if you or I were handed a pair of fast shoes like this that enabled us to run lightning fast. Do you think that we'd get it right, that we wouldn't wipe out on the first time or every time? I really don't think so. I've honestly never been as excited about Sonic as I was watching this animation. And it's the perfect translation of Sonic's gameplay as well. If you're inexperienced but you gain speed in these levels, you're going along at a good clip, and then suddenly you hit some spikes because you were going too fast. For all intents and purposes, I think that this kind of fixes the character, so to speak. You can still have a cool and confident Sonic, but one who actually has a little bit of inexperience and whose overconfidence kind of comes back to bite him every once in a while. I'd love to see more takes on Sonic like this in the future, and if some have existed before, this is at least my first exposure to it. So, what is it about modern Sonic? What is it that draws so many people, especially young people, towards Sonic so much that they want to create their own art, their own stories, their own takes on this universe? Well, I think it still has something to do with flaws, but not flaws as they pertain to a character. In my Mario video, I concluded that Mario is an adult you can trust. In a lot of ways, Mario is perfect, or at least has a veneer of perfection over it, and that works for a lot of us. But I think in the same way, Sonic embodies the idea of puberty and coming of age. This franchise is constantly going through growing pains, and a lot of times this leaves us with either very flawed or less than perfect presentations of the character. And while Mario remains this sort of inaccessible paragon of quality, Sonic in turn is accessible, mainly because of Sega's public iteration on the franchise. It's almost as if a theme of the brand is that it's okay to make mistakes, something that makes fans go, hey, I could do that. Sonic embodies this awkward transitional phase away from a time when you were simple and charming. You've grown, times have changed, you've made some mistakes, but you want to be taken more seriously. I think that for some people, the fact that the franchise is sort of caught in this perpetual state of transition, it's something that gets them frustrated and they kind of just want it to be over. But on the other hand, you have some fans that this really, really resonates with. That's it for me today. I'm making new videos every week at Character Design Forge. Subscribing on YouTube lets you know when new videos are made available. You can follow me on Twitch, Instagram, and Twitter at BagelDenizen. And if you go over to Twitch, recently, this week, I've been doing a ton of streaming, some Animal Crossing commissions, and some new stuff that I'm going to be doing, as well as my Parcel comic. That's something I'm hoping to release later this month, and you can see me sort of go through the process stages with that. My course, Learn Character Design, is a comprehensive character design curriculum. You can learn more at learncharacterdesign.com. It's over 10 hours of video learning. And if you'd like to support me and the channel, you can go to patreon.com/BagelDenizen, and you get all these benefits up on screen. Thank you so much for watching, and have fun creating.